My addiction to one of the most unhealthy things you can put in your mouth began when my classroom aide turned out to also own a donut shop. One day she brought me a cinnamon roll, full of the unholy trinity of carbs, sugar, and fat, with nary a gram of fruit or vegetable, unless you call cinnamon a vegetable. That was decades ago, and out of sight, out of mind, I forgot about cinnamon rolls until an unfortunate day a few months ago. After my daily run with my doggie, I had to get something at the CVS that was a mile away. I parked my car a block away, and as I walked toward the CVS, what did I pass but Johnny's Donuts, with a line out the door. I joined the line and walked out with, you guessed it, a cinnamon roll, a great cinnamon roll. Now, half the time after I finish my run, I get a cinnamon roll and coffee, sit outside, and watch the people line up for that deep-fried artery clogger. As I reflect on my cinnamon roll addiction, there may be a lesson for all of us. That may be particularly timely as we're now in the holiday season. We all take risks every time we get out of bed. I've made the unconscious calculation that the pleasure I get from people watching as I down my cinnamon roll is worth the risk. Most of my diet would make a doctor nod in agreement. So, even though I eat 2 or 3 cinnamon rolls a week, the risk to my health is small relative to the pleasure I derive. For those of you who would rather have a more precise model for deciding when to succumb to temptation, you might consider these questions. Of course, it's not realistic to be so analytical every time you're facing a temptation, but having those in the back of your mind may help you decide more wisely. How great is the pleasure? How long will it last? How much guilt will it invoke? How likely will succumbing cause ongoing harm? How much harm is likely to accrue? How likely is succumbing this time going to be to make you more susceptible to succumbing to that guilty pleasure the next time and other times and other guilty pleasures? And finally, do you want to consider a lower risk version of the temptation, for example, a donut rather than a cinnamon roll? Other common temptations. It might also help to consider some thoughts regarding the following common temptations. We've already discussed eating, so I won't list that anymore. I won't talk about that anymore. Procrastination. That's a common temptation. It's natural to prefer pleasure to pain, even if a short-term pain will yield long-term gain. We all sometimes succumb to procrastination, but at that moment you've decided to endure some pain over pleasure. A way to avoid changing your mind about that is to start with the first 1-second part of the task, even if it's just to open a computer file or look up a phone number. Is there at least one thing that you'd like to procrastinate less? Do you need to play, or the other way around? Do you need to play more and procrastinate more? Exercise. Well, here the pain is literal. It can be, certainly, if I think about running, or weightlifting, or sit-ups, or all that stuff. The good news is that a case can be made for just moderate and therefore less odious exercise. What sort of modest exercise for you is sustainable? Maybe half-court basketball, doubles tennis, or my sustainable activity, which is walking with my dog the mile to Trader Joe's, and now loaded with groceries, schlepping back home. I do that in addition to it's not a run anymore, I'm old, but a fast hike up hills. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Anyway, do you want to exercise more, less, differently? Do you want to tie your exercise to something you know you'll do, like exercising right before dinner? Spending. I too succumb to that temptation. Damn Amazon, it's just so easy to stop writing when some usually unnecessary buying idea pops into my head. A minute later, I've scanned the possibilities on Amazon, clicked, and it's at my door in a day. Damn. All I can say is that you try to recognize the excess shopping for what it is. Maybe it is a way to procrastinate, or it's just the fun of shopping, or the vain attempt to fill an emotional hole in you. Maybe scarier and thus more potent, excess shopping can, like a drug addiction, require an ever bigger dose to get you high. So, do you care to spend less? And if so, is there a danger item or a danger time of day or a danger activity that could make you want to take a break and shop? Or maybe you've been parsimonious so long that you've gotten in the habit of being overly restrictive of your spending. Should you spend more? Another temptation is mind-altering substances. Some people get inordinate pleasure from, for example, alcohol or marijuana, while for other people they're no big deal. And indeed, for some people, the anticipated pleasure is greater than the pleasure actually they experience. And some people seem to experience little short-term negative effects, while other people, for example, get annoyed or even violent when drunk, or eat absurd amounts of food when high on weed. Is it worth considering the collective pleasure you've gotten from your substance abuse over the years versus the negative consequences you incurred, short and long term? Should you continue, therefore, your use? Should you continue your use, moderate your use, go cold turkey and cut it, or even increase your use? Might there be some lower risk activity you want to try substituting for substance use? Sex, another temptation. Maybe unprotected sex feels better. Is it worth the risk of disease in pregnancy? Then there may be the emotional risk, for example, of having sex with a person, if that's likely to entangle you emotionally when you're not ready for that entanglement. If so, might it be worth working hard to restrain yourself for a while until you're more confident in the relationship? Or have you been too self-denying and should have more sex? Another temptation regards your career. Unless you know you're a star, the imposter syndrome is likely. You can feel like an imposter. So that can tempt you to not look for a job or to settle for a job that's lower level than a fair-minded person would say you deserve. So should you aim high, medium, or at least for now, low? Another temptation is gambling. Deep down, most gamblers, including stock day traders, know that in the long run they're going to lose. But the addiction to the short-term adrenaline, or a desire for self-destruction, trumps that. I've been there when I was a teenager, and then somehow, with no apparent explanation, I simply stopped, cold turkey. If you're a gambling addict, I of course wish that for you. Another temptation is video games. I actually consider that a relatively harmless addiction. Yeah, I know, critics claim it inhibits socialization, but not everyone needs to be that social. Whether it's people who like to read books, write, play an instrument, in their garden, or video games. Other critics claim that video game violence can encourage players to be violent in real life, but a 2020 meta-evaluation debunks that claim. On the plus side, video games are interactive, unlike TV. They're filled with problem solving, and good video games have compelling storylines, visuals, and music in addition to the problem solving. A couple examples of such games that are aimed at adults and are not violent: Stardew Valley, Stardew Valley, and the Legend of Zelda series, especially for adults, perhaps Legend of Zelda subtitled Breath of the Wild. So, do you want to play more video games? Fewer? A different game? Another temptation is watching TV or movies. Now, this seems a good example of everything in moderation. Screen watching is fine, with lots of choices available now, so you can pick whatever you want, what you want, when you want to watch it, but it is sedentary, and unlike video games, it's passive. So, do you want less screen time, more screen time, or you want to watch something different than you're currently doing? And finally, temper, another temptation. Some people are tempted to lose their temper. Some people are nearly always calm, but if you often lose your temper, do you want to work harder to control it? For example, leaving the room as soon as you feel your temper starting to rise. Or maybe you've been too controlled and want to more often express at least moderate annoyance. Anyway, a life in which one rarely succumbs to temptation may be too colorless. On the other hand, succumbing too often can lead to a life of disappointment, at least in yourself. Among this little talk's many examples, is there at least one temptation that you would like to succumb to less or more? In any event, I do thank you for watching. I'm Marty Nemko. I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.